Hello again, folks. Welcome back to Max's Cards and Dice Dugout. This is episode number 59, and we're returning to Downey Games Fast Action Racing for a continuation of the 1991 stock car project. This is going to be race number 7, which took place on April 21st, 1991 at North Wilkesboro. It was the First Union 400, and on that day in 1991, Brett Bodine was the pole sitter, and the race was won by owner and driver Darrell Waltrip. North Wilkesboro is an interesting track, no longer on the top tier circuit, I guess you'd say. I believe the last Top Cup race there was in 1996. The track was in disrepair for several years, but due to the efforts of Dale Earnhardt Jr. and some YouTube influencers, the track was revived, and I believe this year, 2023, the NASCAR All-Star race was held there. So anyway, that's where we're going to be today. Before we set the field, let's take a look at the standings after race number 6 at Bristol. Kyle Petty is in first place, followed by Harry Gant. He's 15 points behind. And the rest of the top 10 is Rick Mast, Alan Kulwicki, Davey Allison, Bobby Hamilton, Ricky Rudd, Brett Bodine, Mark Martin, and Ernie Irvin. So the first thing we do is set the field. And I like to give the cards a shuffle and a cut before we put them out on this grid. And as I always mention, this is not a representation of position on the track. It's more of an abstracted view of different grooves on the track. It's the best way I can describe it. Okay, so we start out with Mickey Gibbs, Larry Pearson, Jimmy Means, Ken Schrader, Ernie Irvin, Ricky Rudd, Davey Allison, Chad Little, Jimmy Spencer, Rusty Wallace, Hut Strickland, Harry Gant, Dave Marcus, Stanley Smith, Kyle Petty, Derek Cope, Rick Wilson, Rick Mast, Alan Kulwicki, Mark Martin, Bill Elliott, Sterling Marlin, Jeff Bodine, Joe Rootman, Dale Earnhardt, Michael Waltrip, Morgan Shepard, Darrell Waltrip, Lake Speed, Dale Jarrett, Bobby Hillen Jr., Bobby Hamilton, Terry Labonte, Richard Petty, Ted Musgrave, and Brett Bodine. Okay, so the first phase that we go through is, or the first thing we need to do, I should say, is determine the pole sitter. I'm going to roll the red and white die. We'll read the white die first, and we'll look for the pole sitter rating or range, I should say, on the card, and that'll tell us who the pole sitter is for this race. So it's a 56, so we're going to look for 56. And it's Kyle Petty. I believe this is his second pole. So Kyle Petty will be the pole sitter. We'll put that green marker or green die there. And as I've also mentioned before, there's lots of bookkeeping, so you'll just have to bear with me. I apologize for that. So it's Kyle Petty who has the pole. And he immediately will face a challenge. Now, this challenge is, for the lead in the early part of the race. Kyle Petty, brings them out. He's in the lead, and he faces a challenge early on, and that challenge comes from 53, Stanley Smith. All right, so Smith is going to challenge Petty, and we look at the green race ratings, and for this one challenge only, the pole sitter gets a +1. So Petty's going to be a 12. Stanley Smith is a 2. That's a -10. That's an automatic failure. And since it's greater than -5, since it's a -6 or greater, Stanley Smith is lapped. So he wasn't challenging for the lead. He was challenging or trying to stay on the lead lap. So that's a fail, and he gets a green. And Kyle Petty is the race leader. Okay, so the next part is a mechanical check. So what we do here is we randomly select a driver, and for adjacent drivers using the game rules, rules of priority, and we're going to perform a mechanical check to see if there was any mechanical issues during this race. Now here at North Wilkesboro, mechanical check gets a +1, so it's going to be a little less likely that there's a mechanical issue here than maybe at some other tracks. All right, so the random driver is 56, and that's Terry Labonte. So it's Terry Labonte. His 12 o'clock wraps around down to the bottom here, and it's Dave Marcus. His 3 o'clock is Rick Mast. 6 o'clock is leader Kyle Petty. And the leader can be part of this check. And his 9 o'clock is Harry Gant. Okay, so we're going to be looking at the red mechanical failure avoidance number. It gets a +1. So you need to be less than that number. So, for example, Terry Labonte, he is a 5. He gets 1 for North Wilkesboro. That makes him a 6. He needs a 5 or less to pass this check. If he rolls a 6, he's going to be several laps down. He has had a mechanical issue, had to come in, extended time, probably went behind the wall, came back out. He's going to get a red lap marker. He's going to be many laps down. If it's higher than his mechanical rating, he's forced to retire. All right, so Terry Labonte's a 6 in this check. He needs a 5 or less. He rolls a 10, and he's forced to retire. Okay, so Labonte fails and did not finish. Next is Dave Marcus. Kyle Petty is the race leader. Next is Dave Marcus. He is a 2. That makes him a 3. And the only way he's going to pass this check is on Snake Eyes. He rolls a 7, and he's forced to retire. So he did not finish. Rick Mast. Rick Mast is a 7. That makes him an 8. He needs a 7 or less. He rolls an 11, is forced to retire. So North Wilkesboro is being tough on some of these drivers. All right, next is Kyle Petty, the race leader. He is an 8. That becomes a 9. He needs an 8 or less. He rolls a 10 and is forced to retire. So we're going to have to determine a new race leader. We'll put that here for right now. And that's a fail, did not finish. This is going to shake up the point standings because the top 2 drivers are already out of the race. All right, and the last, well, no, not yet. Here's Harry Gant. He's the last guy. And he is an 11. That makes him a 12. He needs an 11 or less to pass this check. He rolls a 9 and passes. All right, so now we have to determine the new race leader. So the way we do that is we take the race leader's position, we go through the rules of priority, and whichever driver has the highest rating within the rules of priority is the new leader. So Well, the 12 o'clock is gone. Brett Bodine at 3 o'clock is a 9. We're looking at the race rating. Bobby Hamilton at 6 is a 10. Dale Jarrett at 9 is a 10. That makes Bobby Hamilton the new race leader based on the priority rules. Okay, so we have a new race leader in Bobby Hamilton. And he is going to face a challenge. And that's a random selection. We roll a 12. That's going to be coming from Alan Kowicki. And once again, we're going to be looking at the green race rating. Bobby Hamilton's a 10. Kowicki is an 11. That makes him challenging at a +1. He needs a 6 to 12 to take the lead. And he rolls an 11. So we have a new race leader in Alan Kowicki. All right, so that's going to complete phase 1. So we'll put this over here at Kowicki. He's the new race leader. Okay, now phase 2 is a period of green flag racing. So what we do is we select a random driver and the 4 adjacent drivers to that random driver. And they're going to do a check up against the leader's race rating. And we'll use the quality pass matrix. So the random driver is 15, and that's Jimmy Means. That's Means. Okay, his 12 o'clock is Bill Elliott. His 3 o'clock is Joe Rootman. Six o'clock is Mark Martin. And his 9 o'clock wraps around here. It's Brett Bodine. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're looking at the race rating. And Jimmy Means is a 2. He's challenging Alan Kowicki at an 11. He's challenging at a -9. That's an automatic failure. It's greater than 6. So Means wasn't trying to take the lead. He was trying to stay on the lead lap. So he goes a lap down with a automatic fail. So that's green. Next is Bill Elliott. He's an 11. Alan Kowicki is an 11. This challenge is at a differential of 0. Elliott needs a 7 to 12 to take the lead. He rolls a 6 and fails, and Alan Kowicki remains the leader. So it's Kowicki. Elliott fails. Still Kowicki. Next is Joe Rootman. He's a 9. Kowicki's an 11. His challenge is at a -2. He needs a 9 to 12 to be successful. He rolls a 5 and fails. And Alan Kowicki remains the race leader. Next is Mark Martin. He's an 11. Kowicki's an 11. Challenge is at 0. He needs a 7 to 12. He rolls 3 and fails. And Kowicki still remains the race leader. And the last check is going to be coming up against Brett Bodine over here. He is a 9. Kowicki's an 11. He's challenging at a -2. He needs a 9 to 12. Rolls a 9, and we have a new race leader in Brett Bodine. All right, so that's a pass. And it's Brett Bodine, the race leader, who was the pole sitter back on April 21st, 1991. Okay, so now we're going to do some green flag pit stops. We're in the first part of phase 3. So we're going to be looking at the blue pit crew rating for the drivers. And we once again select a random driver and the 4 adjacents, and they're going to go up against the race leader looking at the blue pit crew number and using the quality pass matrix. So this is going to be a 52, and that's Bobby Hillen Jr. Hillen Jr. His 12 o'clock is Stanley Smith. Now, being a green lap driver, he can't take part in this challenge. He would be challenging to get his lap back. All right, so it's Stanley Smith at 12 o'clock. Derek Cope at 3. At 6 o'clock, we wrap all the way around. We come down to Bobby Hamilton. And the 9 o'clock is Rusty Wallace. Okay, so this is pit stops during that recent period of green flag racing. We're going to determine if there was a lead change or if there were any lead changes. As you know, during green flag racing, lead changes can occur quite frequently. Okay, so the first one is Bobby Hillin Jr. He is a 7. Bodine is a 7. That is at a 0, so he needs a 7 to 12 to pass. He rolls snake eyes and fails. And Brett Bodine remains the race leader. Next check is against Stanley Smith. He is a 4. Bodine is a 7. This is at a -3. He needs a 10 to 12. He rolls a 4 and fails. Brett Bodine remains the race leader. Next is Derek Cope. Derek Cope is a 6. Brett Bodine is a 7. That's a -1. He needs an 8 to 12. He rolls a 5 and fails. And Brett Bodine is still the leader. Next is Bobby Hamilton. Bobby Hamilton is an 8. Bodine is a 7. This challenge is coming at a +1. He needs a 6 to 12. Rolls a 7, and we have a new race leader in Bobby Hamilton. So that's a pass. Hamilton's a new race leader. But we still have one last check to do, and now it's going to be Rusty Wallace going up against Bobby Hamilton. Stanley Smith failed. I did forget to give him a second green lap marker. Green lap markers are cumulative, so he's got 2 of those now. He's actually 2 laps down. Okay, but the last check is coming from Rusty Wallace. Rusty Wallace and Hamilton are both 8s. This is at a 0. Wallace needs a 7 to 12 to take the lead. He rolls a 5 and fails. And Bobby Hamilton remains the race leader. Okay, so the second part of phase 3 is a penalty check. Now, we use the blue pit crew ratings, and we're going to check if any teams had a violation in the pits which would cause them to be penalized. And we do that as a random driver and for Jason, and that's going to be 34, and that is Michael Waltrip. Michael. Jimmy Spencer is his 12. Hut Strickland is his 3. Strickland. Chad Little is his 6. And Ernie Irvin is his 9. Okay, we're looking at the pit crew ratings here. And the way this works is lower or equal, there's no violation. If the die roll is higher than the pit crew rating, there's been a violation. The driver was forced to come in for a stop and go. And he's going to be several laps down. All right. Or no, excuse me, he'll be a lap down. All right, so the first is Michael Waltrip. He is a 8. He needed an 8 or less. He rolled snake eyes and passes. Okay, next is Jimmy Spencer. Spencer is a 7. He needs a 7 or less. He rolls a 7. He's good. Hut Strickland is an 8. He needs an 8 or less. He rolls an 8. So he's good. All right. Next is Chad Little. He's a 7 and needs a 7 or less. He rolls a 5 and he's good. So far, no violations. Next is Ernie Irvin. He's an 8. He needs an 8 or less. He rolls a 7, so everyone passes the penalty check. But after all that, Bobby Hamilton is still the race leader. Okay, now we're at a phase here or a portion of the race between phases 3 and 4, where there's going to be 2 challenges in a row. So we just do the random selection using the white and red die. And that's a 24, and that's Ernie Irvin's going to challenge for the lead. Okay. Irvin is an 11. Hamilton's a 10. This challenge is coming at a +1. He needs a 6 to 12 to take the lead. He rolls a 9, and we have a new race leader in Ernie Irvin. So that's a pass, Irvin. Now as we head into phase 4, he's going to face a challenge. And that challenge is coming from 51. There is no 51, so we'll roll again. 51 has been removed. 12. 1, 2, Alan Kowicki. Okay. They're both 11, so this challenge is coming at a differential of 0. Kowicki needs a 7 to 12 to take the lead. He rolls a 6 and fails. And Ernie Irvin remains the race leader. Now we're into phase 4. Going to check if there was any contact. Somebody was rubbed or there was like a minor bang up and it caused some drivers to have contact. We're looking at the yellow contact avoidance rating. This is going to be a random driver and for Jason. And that's a 56. There is no 56. We'll roll again. Whoop, I apologize for that, hitting the camera. It's a 16. It's going to be Bill Elliott. So it's Elliott. Elliott's 12 o'clock comes down to Mickey Gibbs. His 3 o'clock is Ricky Rudd. His 6 o'clock is Jimmy Means, who's already a lap down. And his 9 o'clock goes all the way over to Harry Gant. All right, so we're looking at the yellow contact avoidance rating. Elliott's an 11. But here at North Wilkesboro, probably based on the side, it's on the reason it's, probably due to the reason it's a short track, contact avoidance gets a -1. So Bill Elliott in this case would be a 10. So what we need to do, you need to roll lower than that number, which in this case would be 10 for Elliott. So he's going to need a 9 or less. If he rolls a 9, he's going to go several laps down due to some contact. He'll get a yellow lap marker. If he is higher than his contact avoidance rating, he'll be forced to retire. All right, so Bill Elliott's a 10 in this case. That means he needs a 9 or less. He rolls a 7 and passes. Next is Mickey Gibbs. He's down here. He is a 9. That makes him an 8. He needs a 7 or less. He rolls a 6 and passes. Next is Ricky Rudd. He's a 10. That makes him a 9. He needs an 8 or less. He rolls a 9, and he is forced to retire. Some big names out of this race before its conclusion. So Rudd fails and did not finish. Okay, Jimmy Means. He's a lap down already. He's an 8. That makes him a 7. He needs a 6 or less. He rolls a 9. And he's involved in this bang up, and he is also forced to retire. All right. So Means fails. Did not finish. And last is Harry Gant. He is a 9. That makes him an 8. He needs a 7 or less. He rolls an 8, and he's also out. So this is really going to shake up the point standings. And Ernie Irvin remains the race leader. So Gant fails. Did not finish. And Irvin is the race leader. Okay, so since we had some contact, we're going to do a pit crew check under caution. And this is going to be going up against the race leader. It'll be race leader and adjacent cars plus 1 random. All right, so well, let's do this first. It's going to be Irvin. He's the race leader. It's 12 o'clock is Joe Rootman. His 3 o'clock is Michael Waltrip. His 6 o'clock is Jeffrey Bodine. And his 9 o'clock is Mark Martin. And the random driver. These checks are going up against the leader, Ernie Irvin. The random driver is 45, Dale Jarrett. Okay, so it's Dale Jarrett. All right, the first check is Joe Rootman. This is the pit crew rating. That's the blue number. Okay, they're both 8s. So this challenge is coming at a 0. And so Rootman needs a 7 to 12 to take the lead. And he rolls a 4 and fails. So Rootman fails. And Ernie Irvin remains the race leader. Next is Michael Waltrip. He is an 8. Irvin's an 8. This one is also at 0. He needs a 7 to 12. He rolls a 9. Michael Waltrip is now the race leader. Now the next check is Jeff Bodine up against Michael Waltrip. He is an 8. Michael Waltrip's an 8. Another 0 differential. He needs a 7 to 12. He rolls an 8. And Jeff Bodine is now the race leader. You know, these are these pit stops under caution, which could cause several lead changes. Okay, the next one is Mark Martin. Once again, they're both 8s. Bodine, Martin are 8s. It's coming at a 0. Martin needs a 7 to 12. He rolls an 11. Mark Martin is the race leader. And then the last check is coming up against the random driver, which was Dale Jarrett. Mark Martin is an 8. Jarrett is an 7. This check is coming at a -1. Jarrett needs an 8 to 12. He rolls an 8. Dale Jarrett. After all of the pit stops, Jarrett becomes the race leader. And he now faces a challenge before we go into the closing phases. All right, and that challenge is coming from 32, Dale Earnhardt. Dale Earnhardt up against Dale Jarrett. We're looking at the green race rating. Jarrett's a 10. Earnhardt's an 11. His challenge is at a +1. He needs a 6 to 12 to take the lead. He rolls a 7. And Dale Earnhardt is the new race leader. Okay, now we're in the closing laps action phase. First thing we're going to check to see if there's a mechanical check. This mechanical check will only be on the leader if it does happen. So we look at the card for North Wilkesboro. Mechanical check check happens on a roll of 6 to 12. It's a 4, so that's no. So there's no mechanical check. And the next thing would be Earnhardt's going to face a random challenge. And that is coming from Mickey Gibbs. All right. It's coming from Mickey Gibbs, who is at position 11. All right, so Dale Earnhardt is an 11. Gibbs is an 8. That's a -3. He needs a 10 to 12 to take the lead. He rolls a 7 and fails. And Dale Earnhardt remains the race leader. All right. Now we're going to check to see if there's any more contact. Well, here at North Wilkesboro, on a roll of 4 to 12, there is another contact check. And here we go. We roll a 6, so there is going to be a contact check. Now, this is the race leader, the adjacent cars, and one random. So we already know it's Dale Earnhardt. His 12 o'clock is Chad Little. His 3 o'clock is Rusty Wallace. 6 o'clock is Davey Allison. 9 o'clock is Kent Schrader. And the random driver is Mickey Gibbs, who's at the 11th position. Okay, so we're looking at the contact rating. That's the yellow number. Okay, here at North Wilkesboro, it's a -1. So Dale Earnhardt's an 11. That makes him a 10. And you got to be lower than that number. So he needs a 9 or less. He rolls snake eyes, so he's good. So he passes. This is Chad Little. He's an 8. That makes him a 7. He needs a 6 or less. He rolls a 9 and is forced to retire because it's higher than his contact avoidance rating. North Wilkesboro takes another driver out. All right, so Little failed, did not finish. Next is Rusty Wallace. Rusty Wallace is a 6th. That makes him a 5. He needs a 4 or less. He rolls a 4 and passes. Just barely. All right, Davey Allison is next. He's a 10. That makes him a 9. So he needs an 8 or less. He rolls a 3 and passes. Ken Schrader is next. He's an 8. That makes him a 7. He needs a 6 or less. He rolls a 12 and is forced to retire. All right. Fail. Did not finish. And the last check is against the random driver, Mickey Gibbs. He's a 9. That makes him an 8. He needs a 7 or less. He rolls a 7 and passes. All right. And after all that, Dale Earnhardt is still the race leader. Now, since there was contact, we're doing another pit crew under caution check. And it's going to be, once again, the leader, the adjacent drivers, and one random, but they cannot be lap drivers. So we'll have to pick another driver if it's a lap driver. All right. So the random driver is going to be a 24. So just remember that. I didn't need to roll that yet. Earnhardt's 12 o'clock is now Michael Waltrip. Rusty Wallace is his 3. Davey Allison is his 6. Alan Kowicki is his 9. And the random driver was a 24. That's Ernie Irvin. Okay, so these are pit stops under caution due to that contact that had just occurred. And we will be looking at the pit crew rating and using the quality pass matrix to determine who takes the lead. Okay, so it's Dale Earnhardt. First check is up against Michael Waltrip. He's an 11, or excuse me, he's an 8. Earnhardt's a 10. That's a -2. He needs a 9 to 12. He rolls a 5 and fails. Earnhardt remains the race leader. Next check is Rusty Wallace. He's an 8. Earnhardt's a 10. It's a -2. He needs a 9 to 12. He rolls a 9. We have a new race leader in Rusty Wallace. Okay, so now we're checking Wallace against these drivers. Next is Davey Allison. They're both 8s. This is at a 0. He needs a 7 to 12. He rolls a 12, and we have a new race leader in Davey Allison. Remember, these lead changes are all occurring during pit stops. All right, so next is Alan Kulwicki. He's an 8. Davey Allison's an 8. Another check at 0. Kulwicki needs a 7 to 11. He rolls a 6 and fails. Davey Allison remains the race leader. And the last check comes up against Ernie Irvin. Both drivers are 8s. This check comes at a 0. Irvin needs a 7 to 12. He rolls a 7. And after all said and done with these pit stops, Ernie Irvin is back in the lead. All right, so he's going to face a challenge right here. Okay, and that challenge is coming from 65, Brett Bodine. Bodine's a 9, Irvin's an 11. We're looking at the green race rating. This challenge comes at a -2. Brett Bodine needs a 9 to 12 to take the lead. He rolls an 11, and Brett Bodine is the race leader. Brett Bodine. Okay. The next phase is void if any pit stops under caution have taken place. So we're gonna void that section out. Brett Bodine remains the race leader. And we're going to check to see if there's any green flag racing near the end here. So here at Wilkesboro, that only occurs on a 10 to 12. Or North Wilkesboro, I should say. All right, so we need to roll a 10 to 12 to have some green flag racing. We roll a 4, so that's a no. And we drop down to the final challenge. So the way the final challenge works, it's going to be Brett Bodine going up against the highest rated adjacent driver to him using the rules of priority. Okay, so his 12 o'clock wraps around to Richard Petty. Okay, Richard Petty's an 8. His 3 o'clock is an 8. It's Rick Wilson. Or excuse me, his 3 o'clock is Joe Rootman. We have to wrap around this way. Joe Rootman's a 9. So right now, between Petty and Rootman, it goes to Rootman's 9. That's his 3 o'clock. His 6 o'clock is 8. Rick Wilson, so it's still Joe Rootman. But his 9 o'clock is Dale Jarrett with a 10. So this final challenge is coming from Dale Jarrett. All right. So the race is winding down. And Dale Jarrett's presenting a challenge to Brett Bodine as the final laps are being counted off. So this challenge is coming at a +1. Jarrett needs a 6 to 12 to take the lead and win the race. And anything else, Brett Bodine holds him off and wins. All right, so 6 to 12 for Jarrett. He rolls an 8. Passes Brett Bodine, and the winner of the First Union 400 at North Wilkesboro is Dale Jarrett. He is your race winner. All right, but I'm going to put this marker here at Brett Bodine, and you're going to see why. Okay, so the first thing we do is we remove the winner, who's Dale Jarrett. He was here in spot 45. Okay, so we're going to leave that marker there. Next, we remove Brett Bodine, who was the driver that was part of the challenge. So that's 1 and 2, Jarrett and Bodine. Okay, so next we remove the drivers. I always call this the fun part because it's easy to make a mistake. Next, we remove the drivers who were eligible for that challenge but did not get selected, and we remove them in by highest rating and order of priority. Okay, so the drivers that were potentially involved were the 12 o'clock Richard Petty, he's an 8. The 3 o'clock Joe Rootman is a 9. And Rick Wilson is an 8. Well, Joe Rootman's a 9, so he's going to come off next, and he's going to finish 3rd. Okay. The remaining 2 drivers are Rick Wilson and Richard Petty. Richard Petty's the 12 o'clock, so he comes off next and has a top 5. And finally, Rick Wilson. Okay, so now we can remove that marker, and we're going to concentrate on the race winner's marker the rest of the way out. So the next thing we do is we go in this groove that the race winner was in, which is the middle groove here, the in-between gray shaded area. And we remove drivers by going clockwise from the winner. Highest rated drivers first. So there's 10s, 10s, 10s. Rusty Wallace is an 11. So he comes off next. So is Dale Jarrett. Another good finish for Jarrett. He's climbing back up through the standings. Jeff Bodine comes off next. Ernie Irvin. Jimmy Spencer, the pride of Berwick, PA, who I think is in the bottom right now. No, hold on. Jimmy Spencer goes back. I'm messing this up again. Ernie Irvin's an 11. All right. You're still there, Spencer. Now we go back around looking for 10s. We got Bobby Hamilton. Bobby Hillen Jr. He's a 10. Okay. So now we're done with the 10s. We go back around again. Stanley Smith is lapped twice, so he doesn't come off yet. Then's Jimmy Spencer. All right, so that's an 8. Okay, there's no one left in this middle groove who is not a lap. So the rule states from the middle groove, you always go into the inner groove next. So we're going to come to Hut Strickland and go clockwise that way. So Hut Strickland is an 11. That's as high as you can be rated. He comes off next. Then it's Michael Waltrip. And then Lake Speed. If I can get him off the board. All right. So now we go back out. Since there's no one left in the, this middle groove, or top groove as they call it. We go back out to the outer groove, and in clockwise we'll remove drivers based on rating, highest ratings first. So 8, 9, 7, Darrell Waltrip comes off next. Davey Allison, Sterling Marlin, Alan Kowicki, Mark Martin, Bill Elliott, and Morgan Shepard. Okay. So that's 11s. Now we look for 10s. We don't have any 10s. 9s. No 9s. 8s. Ted Musgrave. Mickey Gibbs. 7s. Derek Cope. Larry Pearson's a 2. And the last one left on the track at the end of the race is Stanley Smith. So now we take these drivers and add the drivers who were previously removed from the race, did not finish, put them at the bottom of the stack. And your top 10 for the First Union 400 at North Wilkesboro, race number 7 in my stock car replay, is race winner Dale Jarrett. Dale Jarrett, Brett Bodine, Joe Rootman, Richard Petty, Rick Wilson. 6, Rusty Wallace, Dale Earnhardt Jr., not Jr., Dale Earnhardt, Jeff Bodine, Ernie Irvin, and Bobby Hamilton finishes 10th. So there you have it. Race number 7 in the books of the 1991 stock car replay using Downey Games Fast Action Racing. That's going to do it for this video. If you hung out, I appreciate you sticking around this long. And until next time, take care.